What is up, ladies and gentlemen? Thank you so much for joining us for this session. This one, we're talking about podcasts and how you can incorporate it into your school, your classroom, and I am so honored that I get the chance to introduce you to my great friend, Ben. He is the Colorado, much more talented, taller, faster, stronger version of me, and I love this dude. I met him at the Apple Distinguished Educator, which obviously he became one before I did, obviously. And we met there, hit it off, and we did a couple episodes of a show called Recap the Chat together. And then after that, we stopped because we were like, you know what? Let's do something big. And before we did that, we decided to do this podcast, not this podcast, this session for you on podcasts. But now I'm excited to introduce you to him. And Ben, I'm going to stop talking because I want to hear what you have to say. So go for it.
Yo, what's up? It's Tyler, Tarver from Tarver Academy.
Hey, like and subscribe.
Like and subscribe on YouTube. What's up, guys? I'm Ben. I am so pumped. I just love any opportunity I have to work with Tyler. We've talked for a long time about how we wanted to do a podcast. I am the host of a podcast here in my district that has had several big-name authors on it that is used for professional development across the country and across the globe, really. And so I just see so much power in this medium for you as a teacher, but also as a tool for your students to show what they know in new and novel, awesome ways. So we are pumped to dive in to this session with y'all. And I can say y'all because I got Tyler on the other end. When I'm just in Colorado, I don't say y'all.
I get full permission. You guys.
I just say yes. You folks, you guys, yeah. But now I can say y'all and I don't feel dirty.
It feels great. It looks great on you. I'll tell you that right now. Hey, and his podcast is Being Humble. It is a killer podcast. It's called Brainwaves, and I'll link to it in the description. You have to check it out. It's a great resource for teachers. Sorry, I didn't know if you were going to bump it later. I had to bump it at the beginning so they don't forget.
Like and subscribe, right?
Like and subscribe.
Like and subscribe. Awesome. Tyler, here's what I'm going to do for you, man. One of my favorite things to do in class with children is this thing called Franken Word. All right, and it is a strategy that I actually picked up from another Apple Distinguished Educator, a guy named Dan Ryder. And what it is it's like a way after you learn a subject, it's a cool activity that kids can show what they know in a creative way. And that book's called Intention, Critical Creativity in the Classroom. Link to that in the in your description here too, Tyler, because it's a great book to check out. But a Franken Word is anytime you take two vocabulary terms from whatever you just learned about and you mash them together to create new understanding. So Tyler Tarver from Tarver Academy, I want you to create a Franken Word. Okay. So smash together two words. What comes to mind when you think of podcasting?
I think audio and I think purple because their logo is purple.
Ooh, okay. So what would that word be?
It would be Audurple.
Audurple, okay.
Does that work? Is that
that
terrible?
If you were in my class, I would have just failed you. But that you kind of got it. Now try to do it in a way that like gives some deeper meaning about like what you think about.
Okay. Podcasts. Okay. How about audio resources? Does that count?
Audio
resources.
Audio what?
Resources.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Like you're learning. Audio learning.
Yeah.
Is that better?
Yeah, I love it, man.
Audio.
I was thinking like powerful and amazing, power amazing, or something like that. But
why don't you just tell me the answer I'm supposed to say? Because I'm ruining everything.
I tried to text it to you, bro.
Did you really?
Wait, no, I didn't. We didn't plan that much.
No, that would have been good.
Been in my basement doing push-ups, getting ready for this, dude. Y'all, I'm with all these baller teachers.
They're so baller, bro.
Start this whole thing over.
No, I think we're killing it. This is perfect.
Awesome. Yeah. So, yeah, I think that's just a cool way to, after you learn about different types of government, you could have kids mash them together, create Franken Words about like what different governments look like together, or after, you can do that anytime. But when I think of podcasting, I really couldn't Franken Word it because there are just so many different words and so many different potentials that I want to mash together because it is such a powerful platform for you as a teacher, for you as a school, for you as a district. But then it's such a powerful format for your students to express their learning. So we're going to talk a little bit about how would you do it as a teacher, why would you do it as a teacher, and then we'll dive into how would your students do it, why would they do it, And then we'll even show ejemplos. That's Spanish for Tyler.
I don't know the answer. Spanish for examples. It's Spanish for examples.
Spanish for examples.
First try. Got it.
All right, we got to start this over.
Muy bien.
No, very good, definitely. So we're going to go through this. How can you as a teacher do it? How can your students do it? And then examples of both. So diving in here just because I'm looking at the time. And we're going to skip a couple slides here.
Bro, we can do whatever you want, man. The time is yours. They have to get PD in the summer to stay a teacher, so you can take as long as you want. Ben's going to talk really for around 12 hours. That's 2 days worth of PD.
That's a really good way to look at it.
Yeah.
They have to be.
They have to. It's part of you're literally being paid to do this. So you're welcome.
Totally. Yeah. So I guess what I just had a couple like little jokes in there. We're skipping them now. Okay. So here's
man, we're gonna be good.
The first. They were going to be really good. Trust me, you would have laughed. So the first thing I have here is that you can see I have a brain scan on your computer right now, and you have a brain on the left and a brain on the right. And Tyler, what do you notice different about just looking at those brains?
Well, I would say it would look like the elevation is larger. The heat map's stronger on the right side. I'll say that.
Nailed it.
First
so,
try.
Yeah, when you look at the map the brain on the left, it is turned off. That is a shutdown brain. You look at the brain on the right, it is lit up like a Christmas tree. And so what we have here is we have brain maps out of the University of Illinois, and they did a study for this program called the Walking Classroom. And that study looked at how your brain reacts after sitting for 20 minutes and how your brain looks after moving for 20 minutes. And so when I think of how do you best leverage podcast content, I think it's moving. I listen to, 6 to 10 hours of podcasts a week, and I would say the majority of that I'm moving. And I remember facts like better than any, like I can pull up sports facts from the sports podcasts I've listened to. I can pull up political facts from the political ones I've listened to. And I think that's because I'm moving and because my brain looks like the one on the right. And so I think as a teacher, as you're creating podcasts, have your students go and move while they're listening to them. So here out in Colorado, we have 300 days of sunshine a year. In Arkansas, Tyler has the other 65.
We do have to alternate. That was in the United States Constitution. Colorado and Arkansas have to swap.
Yeah, it's true. Boom, got that ready to rock it. I should have a laugh track plugged in here.
It's good.
But so oftentimes, like I can think of dozens of teachers here in my district who will record a quick voice memo with the stuff that they used to lecture through, where their students would be that brain on the left, and have them go walk the halls of their classroom in the winter, walk the track of their school in the summer, and get that content, but also get their brains engaged. So I think as we are moving more towards this like holistic body thing, and we know that a healthy body helps have a healthy mind, podcasting is the great format to plug in that way, for sure. Tyler, how much podcasts do you listen to, and what are you typically doing when you listen to a pod?
That's great. I used to listen to a lot more than I do now. I'd listen to probably 10 to 12 hours a week because I drive a lot. And I would just go to work out when I drove, and then anytime I'm working in the yard. Now I've been doing audiobooks, and I'm alternating, but I did just switch to a new one. It's called Bust, something like from when talking about things that peak and then bust, like HQ Trivia. Do you remember that? Remember HQ Trivia?
Dude, yes.
Yes.
I wanted to be that host.
Scott Rogowski.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah, that'd have been awesome. We'd have been great co-hosts on that. But it talks about the rise and fall that I just started listening to that today. But I listen when I drive, when I'm working in the yard, when I'm riding bikes. I like pretty much all the time. If I'm not talking to someone else, I'm listening to either audiobook or podcast. And podcasts are a lot less expensive. I will say that.
Yeah, absolutely. Man, and so many of the, especially more recent books, if you because I host a podcast where we get authors on, and I'm always finding those top name authors. They do the circuit. They do like 5 or 6 different podcasts, and by the time you listen to them on each of them, you have like a really good grasp of their book. And if you actually want to read their book, and sometimes I've been really cramming to do an interview with one of these New York Times bestsellers, and I've listened to them on 10 other shows. Then I buy their book and listen to it there, and I'm like, man, I don't need to actually buy that with cash money. I could have just listened to them on all of these podcasts, because sometimes the podcast even has more than the book does because they maybe aren't as guarded, or publishing takes a long time, whereas podcasts, it's just like boom, you talk and it comes out.
Yeah. I've noticed too, you can see their personality more. A lot of people tone down their personality for the books, but then they get like, you can see a lot more of that shine coming from them whenever it's a conversation.
Totally. So when I typically give presentations with teachers on this whole idea of a walking classroom, what I will typically have them do is kind of go through some reflection. I will have them come into my session. They'll do a quick Franken word on what they're thinking of when they think of podcasts. I then have a podcast for them to go and walk and listen to, and then come back and reflect. But Tyler, I want to ask you some of these same reflection questions. So thinking about your work, or if you were a classroom teacher right now, how would you use podcasts in a classroom right now?
Well, it would be a good way for me to deliver the content that I need them to learn. That is, obviously not visual, but I could deliver it in a way that didn't take up my class time. So I could easily record my phone just on the voice memo, toss it in a podcast. Maybe it could add them value because I'm giving it to my students as a requirement, but then anybody else could get value from it. And I could just say, hey, listen to this before you come to class. And then when they're in class, we can use that time for it to be a conversation to where they can ask specific questions as opposed to just me delivering the content.
Totally, man. So here's a question. I'm actually like, I know you think I'm doing you a solid by being on here. Here I am, been called from brainwaves, but you're doing me a solid because the number one stickler when I'm like trying to be like, hey, you should start podcasting. I feel like my social studies teachers, my English teachers, my science teachers who have that lecture content are like, yeah, totally. I could easily just lecture into my phone and they go walk and listen. My math teachers are the ones that are like, that doesn't work for fractions.
No.
How could audio content work for math, man?
You know what? I think that for math audio content, I think I would look more at the encouragement side of it, because a lot of times as a math teacher, you are encouraging students. So where you could have a conversation, say, talk them through, maybe make it shorter, 5 to 10 minutes, and make it like a daily inspirational thing for them to help them be motivated.
So kind of like the mindset of it.
Yes.
So like, here's how you would graph it.
Yeah. And here's why it's useful. Like, this is why you need to learn Pythagorean theorem, is to make a ramp, and then you could tell a story about a time when it came in handy. Because I got that all the time in the math classes. When I ever use this in real life? And I'd always go,
yeah,
well, I use it every day. But that's because I taught math. But they would never use most of that stuff.
Yeah. Who's that amazing math teacher from who did Desmos?
I don't know
what I'm talking about.
Sounds great. Me? Is it me? No, it's not me.
No, he's better than Tyler Tarver.
Wow,
Tarver.
that hurts. Only in my heart spot. That really hurts.
No, it's Dan.
Dan Meyer.
Dan Meyer.
I remember him.
Yeah. Okay.
He tweeted me once. No big deal. It's like whatever. If you want me to sign something, I can. Dan, like signature this.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Yeah.
So he said one of the cool things with math, but I think it's applicable for every single subject, is like, if what you're about to teach the kids is the aspirin, what is the headache and how are you creating it? And so thinking about like your math content, how do you make it like give the kids a headache and figure out, I need aspirin for this? And so I think, like you just said, Tyler from Tarver Academy, how can you in that podcast really frame the problem and frame the why behind our about to learn Pythagorean theorem? So you could really tell a story about how the math is applicable, or I loved your idea about mindsets there.
Thanks, man.
Yeah. So diving in now. So you've decided like you are interested in creating some audio content that your students can walk around the track to, or they could listen on the bus ride home, or while they are babysitting little brothers or sisters or whatever it is. You want to create some audio content. How do you go about doing that? For whatever reason, I think teachers are more afraid of the word podcast than they are video. Like in this distance learning, teachers are like really acquainted with, oh, I have to make a video about this. If you can make a video, you can 1000% make a podcast. And so that's, I think, my first piece of encouragement. Tyler, would you agree teachers are more afraid of making a podcast than they are a video?
Yes, and I don't get that because a video is a podcast but with visuals. So it's like you could do a podcast in your PJs. You could call it podcasting in my PJs and just talk about, experiences. That's
You
$100
might
million.
not want to do that as a state certified.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, don't say that. Don't say that. That's a good idea. Good call, man.
But yeah, 100%. If we turn the video off of this, you don't want to do that because you're going to miss. Like, this is the moneymaker. But you know, if we turn this video off, it is a podcast. And so if you can make a video, you can 1000% make a podcast. And in a lot of ways, it's easier because little cuts and stuff that you can make in a podcast without it being obvious, you can't actually make in a video without it being really clear. So it can be kind of deceptive how you could ramble on for 45 minutes and have a very concise 10-minute little podcast, and they wouldn't know all the cuts that you made. Whereas with a video, you would see like the little glitches as you're going about making those cuts. But would you agree with that, Ty?
Yeah, and I would actually add something to that. You know, about 10, 15 years ago, the big thing on the internet was blogs, like people would read. And then now, over the past 10 years with YouTube, with smartphones, it's become video. I think, and I've heard some other people talk about this, I think the next big wave is audio. And here's the reason. It's because when you, like you just said, with video, you're using your eyes and your ears. It's taking up all of your attention. Whenever you do audio, like you talked about earlier, is you can do two things at once. So whenever I listen to it, I can work out. I can be in my office. It can be in the background. I can be, you know, working in the yard. I'm taking care of two things at one time. And I think we're going to see a huge rise of podcasting and audio because of that, because you can continue with your life. You don't have to like sit down like a book or a blog or a video, and it consumes all of you.
Yeah, and if you look at Tyler and I both have a love of this online sports blog called The Ringer.
Yeah, we do.
Every single one of those podcasts is also a pretty high quality video, like better than this. And I never once have actually watched those videos. I'm always listening because I want to do something else while I'm doing it. So
yep.
I'll yes and that, Tyler. But I also think the rise of smart speakers. Gary Vee is a mentor of mine, probably a mentor of yours too.
Yeah, he's real smart. But he cusses, so
be
careful when you Google.
He does. He's got a potty mouth.
He does.
But he talks a lot about how using smart speakers, they're starting to index all of these podcasts, and eventually you'll be able to say something like, "Hey Siri, how do I solve the," or how would Tyler Tarver solve the? Wow, I just said that, and Siri popped on my phone.
Yeah.
But how would Tyler Tarver?
Well, that's her job.
Tyler Tarver.
So.
I should. How would Tyler Tarver solve the Pythagorean theorem? And it would be able to look through all of Tyler's podcasts and play that part of it. So that there's just a ton of reasons why you would do this, and it's way easier than we probably think it is. And so we're going to talk about the process. It's really a 3-step process, which is you need to make the MP3, the WAV, whatever you want to make it as. You need to make your recording file. You need to put it somewhere. And then you need a way for kids or your audience to go and listen to those. So you got to create the audio, post the audio, share the audio. We're going to talk through how you would go about doing those. But really, those are pretty easy steps. So when it comes to creating, anything to add to that, Ty?
No, I was just saying I agree with you. It is. It's not as difficult as you think. So whatever conception in your head of like, oh, I got to pay for this, pay for that, you can do this whole process free, and you can do it easily. And you can do it all from your phone, all of it. So Ben, take it away. What would we do?
Totally. So when it comes to creating audio, we're going to talk through the different platforms and how you would go about doing that. So we're going to start, Tyler and I are both Apple Distinguished Educators. If you have an Apple device, then it's as easy as one of the most powerful audio editing tools out there, which is a tool called GarageBand. And there's tons of different ways that you can go about watching tutorials on it, but it's a big red record button. And all the tools that you use during distance learning of cutting and splicing is exactly what you're going to do in audio format. If your parents didn't love you and you don't have an Apple device, on a Chromebook, I think probably the best tool out there, and it is a really powerful tool, is one called Soundtrap. Very similar to GarageBand, but it's web-based. It has a big red record button, allows you to record, splice, cut. Tyler, I know you're also on the dark side. What are some other Google-based tools for if our folks have Chromebooks that you would recommend?
Well, that's good. You can actually use a website because, Chromebooks give you direct access to the website. So not a app specific or an add-on or extension specific, but you can use a website called Anchor. and they have it as an app as well, so you can run the whole thing from an app. Have you ever used Anchor before?
I have used it on my iPhone, yeah, but I've never used it
on a computer. So you can use it on the desktop version. It works it's super user-friendly, clean interface, and actually just got bought recently by Spotify, which, Spotify is trying to make a big push into the podcast game to start trying to compete with Apple. And so you can do all of it from there, and you can drag and drop, edit, cut, and even record all of it straight from Anchor's website. And you can publish a podcast for free with Anchor, and it'll go out everywhere, and they do it all for you.
Yeah. How do you go about competing with someone who the medium is actually named after?
Yeah, that makes it tough, because it's like, I'm going to go listen to a podcast that is named after iPod. Yeah, which Apple created. I know that never, like, that always fascinates me. It's like, say, I need a Kleenex. Kleenex is the brand, not like you need a tissue. Like,
don't you say Coke? You say I want a Coke, right?
No, everybody from the South says Coke. What do they say in Colorado?
You say like pop, or
give me a soda, or give me one of them sodas.
Or you say Aquafina or other healthy things, because we have 300 days of sunshine all the days.
That's right. So you need to stay hydrated. That's good. We're just in the dark out here. We're the Alaska of the South. That's what they call Arkansas.
Do they really say that?
No. Well, they'll both start with, hey, we're both really easy to get to when you have to sort by state, when you're filling out a form online. Yeah. So that's pretty convenient. Yeah. We're the fourth one, which is really convenient.
That's, congrats.
Yeah, you have to roll down to the seas over there.
So a couple questions I have, and we can cut this out or whatever, but when it comes to Anchor, who actually owns, that's been the one, if you make it big, right, like you become the next Joe Rogan and you've housed or launched your career.
Or the next Brainwaves.
Right, exactly. What ends up happening with that? That would be my only concern. I've heard great things about Anchor if it's something, that isn't going to blow up. And, but they do own the content and could put ads in front of it if you ever got to the point where you had millions of listeners. But I think at that point you have other opportunities and problems, and so you can worry about it then. Is that kind of your advice with that?
Yeah, I almost brought that up earlier, but I want to slow your roll. That is one of the things that people talk about with Anchor. If you host with Anchor, they own essentially your podcast. Now, you're not paying for it. It's free, and they don't charge you for it, and they're not making money on you. And you can choose to put ads for Anchor into the podcast. So you can drag and drop. And I think for every 1,000 listens you get that hear the ad for Anchor, you get $15. So it's a way to make money if you get a ton on there, and it's a really easy way to do that. However, and you can opt out of that, but they do own it. So I had a podcast on Anchor. It was actually a basketball podcast, and I wanted to switch over because I started paying for a service called Transistor. It's like $20 a month. And I could host multiple podcasts because I had 4 or 5 podcasts. And so I wanted to shift it over with the other ones. And it was a little bit of a hassle to get it switched over because Apple saw Anchor as the owner. And so they had, I put in a bunch of requests, and then they finally shifted everything over, and it finally got located on Transistor. Now, I own on Transistor. I'm the owner of it. And they even actually they'll submit it to Spotify. You can have Transistor automatically go to YouTube with a graphic. You can push it all those places. The only one they don't push for you automatically is Apple, because they want you to continue to own it. And so that's a great question, Ben. Wow, your head's up, man. You're pretty heads up.
I know. I'm pretty thorough here. So, yeah, this is all, we're going to get into the hosting here in one segment. But, yeah, totally that beware. If you're afraid, or if you hope someday that you get millions of listeners, you might want to choose a host that you actually pay for so that you own it. I have had a quick story of just a friend who hosted a podcast on Anchor, and for whatever reason, he had one of the keywords that ended up trending, and so he ended up having hundreds of thousands of listens on his podcast.
Wow. And
they inserted ads into his podcast, and it wasn't ads for something that he would have ever condoned, and he didn't get the money for it. But if you're just hoping to hit your school community, they're not going to add ads to it, and there's no need to fret about that. If you hope to be the next Tyler Tarver of Tarver Academy, like and subscribe, you might want to choose a different service. Next tool when it comes to creating audio is if you are on a Windows machine. Actually, the first audio editor I ever learned on is a really cool desktop-based piece of software that's free called Audacity, and it is a very powerful baseline tool there. There's not tons of plugins for different instruments and stuff, but when it comes to voice recording and editing, Audacity is a great program there. So you simply, in any of those tools, utilize the playhead, which is that big line that you're used to seeing in iMovie or Windows Movie Maker or WeVideo, and that tells you where in your timeline you are, and you move that playhead all the way to the left, push the big red record button, and you start talking to the world. When you are finished with your audio, you export it as an MP3 or as a WAV file, whatever you're fancy, and then it becomes, where do I want to put this? Like, I have this awesome piece of content, it's time to put it somewhere, and that's where we dive into the hosting of your file. So you've recorded your audio, you have this amazing piece of audio, now you have to put it somewhere. And my parents would be like, well, I think I just put it in the cloud. I'm not sure what is the cloud or how I put it in the cloud, but yeah, you got to put that somewhere so that people can experience it. So you have it on your desktop, you have it in your documents, you have that audio somewhere. So now it comes to, how do we host that audio? And here are the screenshots of those different tools. But you can see it's all the same with waveforms and playheads and red record buttons and all that.
Don't be overwhelmed by all those words he just said. Okay, guys? Don't be overwhelmed. Ben's a smart guy. Ben's a smart guy.
Look at me.
Look at him. Would you look at him?
Right, absolutely. So when it comes to hosting audio, a couple different things. The first place is, you can always, if this is a podcast for your students, you can host it directly in your learning management system. If you use Google Classroom, if you use Schoology, if you use Edmodo, all of those things house audio recordings and have a really good player that will load when you're on Wi-Fi and keep playing when they go off. And so a lot of our teachers who make podcasts put their MP3s just directly in Schoology. A kid loads it in the classroom and they're walking the track where there's no Wi-Fi. But since they loaded it in the classroom, it's golden and working. So the first place I would say is, you could easily put this directly into your learning management system, your LMS. The next place that's a great place and a really underrated place, since we are all, I don't always just talk bad about Google, since we're all teachers and most of us are Google Apps for Education, unlimited Google Drive storage, that is a great place to house your audio file, because then you can, in the sharing options, change it to anyone with a link can view, and you have unlimited. Really, like, I don't know why more people don't house audio inside of Google Drive. Tyler, have you ever heard anyone throwing it in there and sending the link out that way?
Yep. Actually, I have some teachers that do that, because, I encourage them, like, hey, toss it on YouTube, and they can make it unlisted. But a lot of them would, because you can actually, like you said, make the link in Google to where anybody with a link can listen. But a lot of them can go in their classroom and just share the file with their class, so only people in their organization can listen to it, because you have to be logged in. Or they can just share it with specific students, so only their class. Because that's one of the things on YouTube is, you can say unlisted, and you have to have the link, but then a student could grab that and toss the link on Facebook and share it with the whole world. So they can be really specific with what they're talking about if they just share it with their students. So that's great, man. Thank you for saying that about Google. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. The other cool part about throwing it in Google Drive is that regardless of device that you're listening to, it works super well on an iPhone, an iPad, a MacBook, but then it works even better on a Google device. So that's the great part. Anytime I do this session at a conference, I always make my podcast and put it in Google Drive, because I know that with that link, I then usually make that link also a QR code, so they just hold it up to the screen and it's playing across all platforms. And so Google Drive would be a great place to put that as well. I've also heard of folks who have Dropbox accounts who put that in the Dropbox account, who use their iCloud account. SoundCloud. You ever host a podcast in SoundCloud, Tyler?
I haven't. I have gotten copyright-free music from SoundCloud and put it in YouTube videos. But I've never hosted a podcast. Now, I had a podcast that went there automatically, because they push it out to all the different streaming services. So I guess, yeah, I have, to answer your question.
You've been there, man.
Yeah, SoundCloud rapper.
So,
that's me.
So then there's obviously the big ones, which now we're talking about Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Those are places that typically, unless you're using something like Anchor, your podcast host provider will automatically put it there for you. So Tyler already mentioned his podcast provider, which is Transistor, you said?
Yes.
What are some other ones you've used?
I've used Libsyn was the first one I ever used, and I liked it a lot, but it was very, like, their interface was super kind of industrial looking, a little bit older looking. It looked like it's something out of like the early or the late 1999-ish. I don't know why I got specific on the year there, but then
well,
go ahead.
Libsyn is the original podcast provider, also the biggest, and also the most expensive. So
Yeah.
I used Libsyn a long time ago. It's incredible, but it's probably overkill. That's Serial uses Libsyn, Joe Rogan uses Libsyn, The Ringer, Tim Ferriss, all the big shows use Libsyn. So that's the best, the most reliable, as in 99.9% uptime, but also the most expensive.
Yeah, and then I switched over. I did Anchor. I used that for a little bit, and then I switched over Transistor. I've kind of loved Transistor, to be honest with you. It's my favorite of all the ones I've used. How about you? Which ones do you use, or have you used?
Yeah, so like I said, I used Libsyn when I did my own podcast like many years ago. With the current one that I'm working on with Brainwaves, we use Simplecast, and we're very happy with that. That's a great one. I think it's $20 a month. You have unlimited. A lot of these places charge you by the megabyte that you put up there, so you have unlimited. So we can upload as many different episodes as we want. We're not limited anyway, and then it goes really well, and it puts it in all of those places for me.
I know some of them also charge you based on the amount of downloads you get. So if you hit a certain amount of downloads, which Brainwaves is super popular, have you had to like pay a higher rate any month because you've had a bunch of downloads?
That's the other cool part about Simplecast is they do not upcharge for any, like, even if they had a Serial, they do not charge any different.
Oh wow, that's awesome.
Their tiered pricing comes into how much you want to dive into the analytics, and so you can check episode, like you can check not just on Apple Podcasts, but you could dive in and say like what % of my listeners were still listening at the 3-minute mark across platforms, and what %. Like I want to compare Spotify users, what time of day Spotify users listen compared to what time of day Apple Podcast listeners listen, so that I can adjust when I put my ads out there and stuff like that. So that's where their tiered pricing comes into how deep you want to dive into the analytics, and we just pay to kind of just see the baseline. Like we want to see general time of day and then how many listeners we have per episode. And after all those zeros, I just, it's all the same to me.
That's good, man. That's so good. Yeah, that's really good analytics, because that's one of the negatives that people have always said about podcasts. You can't see a lot of specifics. Where do people drop off? What's your listener rate, especially across platforms? That's awesome, because I know podcasts like Apple themselves have just like over the past year or two really kind of tried to invest in the analytics, and I feel like mine never like really matches up. But then again, I know it's pushing out beyond just Apple, but I like the idea of one of them really breaking down the analytics.
Yeah, so that's really cool. But again, it's all about how big, who's your audience, and how do you need to get to them. And so if you have big dreams of hitting a global audience, I would suggest you look into a paid podcast host. If you are looking for just your school community, I highly recommend just putting it on Google Drive, putting it inside of your LMS, or putting it on YouTube. Those are all great options. And then it really just comes down at that point to how do you get your audio to your students, to your audience. And so you could easily post the link to it to your learning management system. You can do QR codes and guerrilla market it and put it around different places inside the school. There's a lot of student podcasts in my district, and students will hang up the link to the QR code and put it in the locker bay. So there's just tons of ways to share it in there. And then obviously your viewers don't need to know this, but just social media is a great way to share that you've listened to something super cool.
Yeah, it's also really nice because podcasts are free. There are some services where it's like, hey, listen to this podcast on here and pay like $3 or $6 or $9 a month. But almost 99% of the podcasts you can listen to, they're free. And so it's a great way to kind of pay back these creators for making and taking all this time to provide you with value or entertainment or education. And so just by sharing it and giving them more exposure, that's a really cool thing you can do.
Totally. Yeah, as a podcast host myself, I would say that people sharing on social media means more than ever if they sent me $5 or
Well, you get $500. You get your big money podcaster.
500,000, Tyler.
Yeah, that's a signed Von Miller jersey behind you. So he gave it to you personally.
Actually, I think because you see my webcam, they see me good stuff. So I think they see Timothy Tebow.
Oh, Timothy Tebow. I've heard of him.
He's probably the best college quarterback ever.
Really? Is he better than Matt Jones?
He's awesome.
Because Matt Jones is pretty good, and I worked at a summer camp with him once. He's pretty tall.
I don't even know that.
That hurts.
I don't know what that is. He's pretty tall. That's good. Tyler, anything to add before we dive in then to how teachers might empower their students to create their own audio experiences? Any other things to add?
One other thing I do want to add when we talk about platforms is don't undervalue YouTube as an audio platform. The premium service for YouTube is YouTube Premium. It's the one you could pay for. Well, that allows you to play a video and then get out of the YouTube app and still hear the audio. For me, a lot of times I will click on something. I'm listening to something from Carl Lentz right now, Carl Lentz and TD Jakes, and I was working out in the yard. I hit it on YouTube, listened to it, and clicked out of it and closed out my phone, and I can listen to it like it's a podcast. Fun fact, Ben, and this is talking about music. I don't know how it plays in with podcasts, but I would assume it's in the same bucket. Of all the music listened to or streamed on the internet, Apple, Pandora, Spotify, everything, 49% of all music is on YouTube. Audio is, and that's like everything else is the other half. It's everything else combined. YouTube has half of the market in music. And I think that we're going to see a rise in the audio market for YouTube as well. So just throwing that out there. Don't undervalue it. Even if you have to just put like a graphic up and then stick the audio. A lot of people listen to Joe Rogan. His podcast has a YouTube channel as well. A lot of people listen to it on there as opposed to just on Spotify or Apple.
Yeah, my brother-in-law is a mail carrier and listens to every episode of Joe Rogan, but he does it on YouTube and just has the video up there as he's driving, but he never actually looks down. But for whatever reason, that's just where he prefers. And so I feel like using a podcast player like Apple Podcasts or Google or whatever would be a much better experience, and it doesn't take all this data. But yeah, totally, man. That YouTube, do not underestimate that, and probably what people have already discovered having to sit through this in YouTube and also all the podcast players, you can adjust the speed at which you are consuming the content.
What do you listen on?
If I'm listening to a sports podcast, I do 2.5 or 3.
Mm-hmm. You just roll.
How about you?
I'm 1.5 is the slowest I'll ever listen. 2 is average. And then if I'm really just trying to get through something, I'll crank it up to 3. So
what do you do on Audible when you're doing audiobooks?
Oh,
they're
2.
They read so slow. I can do 5 sometimes on those, and that's incredible because then you're getting through a huge. But I have to have my good headphones on and not any other noise to be going on.
Yeah, if you get distracted, you're missing like a full chapter. So it's like you have to really tune in. When you crank it up, you're like,
if you hit a pothole, you're already on chapter 4, and Harry Potter is already killed Voldemort.
Done. You're like, wow, that was quick. The boy who lived.
Yeah, to kind of just plug my pod, I challenge any listener to try to keep up with my co-host, Becky Peters. She's just the best in the biz. She's from Illinois. And she talks really fast, and so sometimes, because I edit in 2x speed as well using Logic, which is a great program to edit instead of GarageBand, but it's hard to keep up with her at that speed. So if you give Brainwaves a listen, tweet me and tell me how fast you can listen.
That's right. Tweet him. He's got his Twitter right underneath his face.
I do. There it is. Check it out. All right. Next thing is, all right, so the real question here becomes, okay, I get how I could use it as a teacher. Maybe I could empower my principal to use that to communicate with families, give family, updates on the school to the family. And I think during this time of distance learning, our students want to connect with a voice, and having a voice in their earbuds is a really intimate experience. And I encourage you, give it a try. I know my daughter is in kindergarten, and her teacher sent her a couple personalized little voice memos, and she listened to them dozens of times. And there was something just really amazing about that was different than just a video that was for the whole class. And so I think you could easily make little audio clips for individual students, but also it can be a really intimate way that you tell stories and engage with your students if we have to keep distance learning going in the fall, or if hopefully, God willing, we are back. But then the question becomes, when we're with students, or now that we're distance learning and we're like, okay, this essay, writing an essay to show me what they learned doesn't cover it. How can I engage them at home in new and cool ways? How can I empower my students to create podcasts? I just want to share a couple of my favorite examples with you. And these come from another one of my friends, actually in Minnesota, in St. Paul, Minnesota. His name is Jesse Buteau. And he has his students each year do this project called This Fifth Grade Life. And so it really is a culminating project that they turn in at the end of fifth grade, and they do a big listening party. But what he does is he has students all year start to curate and think about the best story in their entire family. So the students interview their aunts and their uncles and their mom and dad and whoever they're living with, and they dive deep into all right, what is the best story? What makes a good story? Am I going to try to make people laugh? Am I going to make them scared? Am I going to make them cry? And there have just been, all of these are out and hosted on his website, and we'll link that here for you as well. But there are episodes that delve into illegal immigration, into cancer, into racism, into some really, really deep stuff for a fifth grader. And hearing them and just being really engrossed in their audio is an experience that you're like, whoa, that is powerful. And so he has them do this. They do it all. They are in a shared iPad environment. So he sends them home with the iPad to do exactly what we're doing. So just the lessons that you can get kids into how to tell a great story, that is probably the most important skill that we've been working on as teachers since we have been teaching. Through all of human history, it's been about how can you engage people with stories. And if you can do that, you can walk into any job interview and crush it. You can host a podcast yourself. You can be Tyler Tarver or Tarver Academy.
Or even brainwaves if you want people to actually listen to it.
Yeah, get you some of that, man. Get you some of that. So Tyler, in addition to something like this, where you have your whole class diving into family stories, every year NPR does an amazing project called the NPR Student Podcast Challenge. It has a grand prize, a cash grand prize, and then they'll also send out someone from NPR to your school to kind of do a little story about it. So every year I've worked with a couple schools here in Colorado who've entered it. They've never won, but they've gotten pretty, done some amazing storytelling. And it's just been a blast to have them, instead of writing an essay, do a podcast. And I would say there's certainly podcasts where people are winging it and going from the hip, and there's not a lot of prepping for it. But I can say that doing a podcast for these couple of years has been harder than any essay, any paper, any project that I've ever completed, because of the amount of work and the thought that goes into a podcast. So I'd say, if you want your kids to be better critical thinkers, having them make a podcast is the best way to do that. If you want them to be better collaborators, having them do it in a group. I have a co-host who I couldn't do the show without, and she's made me a better collaborator because I've worked alongside her and had to develop this thing together. If we want our kids to be better communicators, there's nothing that really you have a real good metric of am I engaging this audience? And if not, how, Tyler and I talked to you about our failed YouTube show before that we did.
We were 2 for 2. We were 2 for 2.
We would have gotten better, and we will. There's something coming, all our teachers. Something's coming.
That's right.
But I think it's just a great way to really communicate and see and have real-time data of how are you communicating with people. So, yeah. Tyler, what can you think as far as getting our students to create their own podcasts.
Yeah, I think, and I'm always a big, I like to promote skills that students can develop that they can take with them for the rest of their life. And so, obviously you and other teachers are going to have them write papers, write essays, and that's something they can do, later on in life. I don't write a ton of essays about stuff anymore, but it is a handy skill to have. You could also add this into their repertoire, and not only are they learning your content, your curriculum, but they're learning how to create audio, how to have conversations, how to be creative in that process. And now if they do want to create a podcast when they get out of school or while they're still in school about something they're passionate about, you just gave them something else to add on their resume or that they can make a full career out of.
Totally. Yeah, and I was just going to pull it up here, but in 2 years of doing this show, our Google Doc just of questions for the authors that we have on is 250 some pages of just questions for the author. Our show note Google Doc is, I think, close to another 200 pages. So there's certainly writing that goes into it. There's writing the tag for the social media to put it out there. There's writing this show description. There's writing the show notes. So there's every skill that we want our students to do, but maybe we bore them by asking them to do a 5-paragraph essay, is enhanced through asking them to do a podcast, but it also hits a global audience. So I do want to take this opportunity real quick just to plug our show. Our show is Brainwaves. There, you can check it out at Brainwaves on Twitter. We post our shows there, but mostly I would recommend you look in your podcast player of choice. It's everywhere you can listen to a podcast: Google Podcasts, Apple, Spotify. We have, I think we've had 15 New York Times bestsellers. We have hundreds of thousands of downloads, 82 countries, all 50 states, and we would be honored if you would be amongst those listeners.
That's right. That's awesome. Please check it out. Check out Ben on Twitter. He is an awesome educator who is very innovative, always throws out resources, thoughts, and he's just a great dude. And I love to support great people. Ben, thank you so much for pouring into these teachers and helping them get better every single day. Thanks, man.
Totally. Thank you. Have a great year, y'all.
Y'all be good. Stay sweet, you guys, with your pop. Hey guys, I'm sorry, I just coughed. That's terrible. All right, I'm gonna add Ben in. Whoa, what's going on my screen? Get out of here. I just switched my audio. Can you guys hear me? We're got time for a couple questions for Ben. He is taking time out of his day to talk to you guys, chat with you about stuff we got going on. Ben, thanks again so much, man. You've got a lot of expertise and you back up experience with it's actually a successful podcast. So that's pretty cool.
Well, thank you so much, man. Thanks for having me. Super cool.
I probably need to do something where I can hear you.
Yeah. I'm hearing a weird echo too.
Oh man, that's on me. What's that?
You're
I'm gonna toss you in. Thank you guys. Ben, you want to tell him something? Is there anything you didn't get to mention in there? Do you guys have any questions for Ben? You can toss in the comments.
Ben's audio is better. I paid whoever that is to say that. Jay Humberson, I see you.
It's good. That's awesome. Ben, what would you, if someone was taking their first step into going to find a podcast, do you have any recommendations for them? Is there something you recommend for education, for just entertainment, anything?
Yeah, I think just pull up any podcast player and search for anything that you like. That's kind of the gateway into podcasting, is that there really is free content out there for any single thing that you could possibly like. It was through podcasting that I lost 100 pounds. I started getting into listening to like health and fitness podcasts, which is how I learned about the paleo movement and went low carb and then intermittent fasting. And so really anything that you're interested in, you can find a podcast about. I'm a real big fan of like the Radio Lab stuff, but yeah, if you have a Google phone, just, pop up Google Podcasts. If you have an Apple phone, hop up Apple Podcasts. Crystal, I see you. How does student privacy come into account when posting podcasts? Yeah, great question. I think that's definitely a state-by-state issue. Colorado has the strictest data privacy laws in the country. So we have to be really careful about that and the amount of information that you give in a podcast. And so you can't give any personally identifiable information. So you couldn't be like, hi, I'm Susie Smith, a third grader at Longs Peak Elementary School. You have to, sometimes we'll have kids give code names or, I go by Kevin, but just don't give any personally identifiable information or information that someone could use Google to really niche in on who somebody is. But that's a great question. But it really is a state by state thing. I'm sure in Arkansas, y'all can do anything, right?
We're pretty chill. We're pretty
Yeah.
chill in Arkansas, bro.
Good.
Oh, we synced back up. Look at us.
Look
at that.
Can you hear these drops?
Let's go get 'em.
Yeah, let's get it. Beyonce right there.
That's good. Thank you. That'll ruin my YouTube.
Oh,
I'm
because
just kidding.
now.
No, I'm kidding.
Oh, okay.
I'm kidding. You actually get 6 seconds of material on YouTube before they copyright you. So
Ooh, 6 seconds. That's all I need.
okay. So last two. I know you guys. You got a few minutes.
Yes,
So do you
Mallory,
have any?
great question, Mallory. I love Wow in the World and Story Pirates. Those are both. I just had a big drive with my daughter who's 6 years old, and we listened to like a 45-minute Story Pirates. It's a really cool idea. Basically, what happens with that show is that little kids write in story ideas that are really basic, and then these like sketch comedians take their stories and make them really funny. And the kids love it, but I found myself laughing, and so it's a great thing that. The other cool thing I didn't get a chance to say inside of our session was you can actually, as a student, you can actually listen 2 grade levels above what you can read. And so it's a great way to get kids really immersed into that higher level content and those higher level thinking skills that they couldn't necessarily access that information via reading. So that's a really, I would recommend both of those for elementary kids.
Have you heard any good ones for math?
For math, all I do is defer people to Tyler Tarver Academy. Like and subscribe on YouTube.
My man, Ben.
No,
I like that.
I really haven't. I haven't heard any good ones for math, but I haven't really dove into that. But we can look at that and loop back.
Brooks, on yours, Brooks already went in and downloaded Anchor and started a sample podcast. So it's going to be an Anchor until you choose to push it out. So Anchor will create the trick is for podcasts, it's an RSS feed. It's like a blog. That's like the core that shoots out everywhere. And so you just essentially need a host that can house your RSS feed. Correct, Ben?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. So until you start pushing it out to those platforms, yes, you can share directly from Anchor. When you're ready, you can push it out everywhere else. And I'll tell you this is just a frustration fact. And you can tell me if you've seen something different. The times I've had the greatest frustration in getting it approved with Apple, because it usually takes anywhere from 4 to 10 days to get a new one approved, is with the artwork. They are very specific about the dimensions of your JPEG or your graphic for your show. They're very specific. So it's really good. Ben, anything else? Anything else you want to say before I give them their PD credit and they disappear into the darkness?
No, y'all stay sweet. Y'all be good. Is that how we end this?
We like to say a lot of y'all, man. It's so good. It's so smooth. I don't even notice it.
Feels really good. It's like riding a bike.
It really is. Like you're going downhill. I'm like, you guys. I'm like, you guys, wait up. But
Yeah.
you know, if you're going to
Boom. Just
arms up, City of Angels, baby. You know what I'm saying?
Totally.
Oh, terrible reference.
Yeah.
Okay.
Great seeing you guys on here. Thank you so much.
Yeah. You can stay if you want. You don't have to leave.
What do I do with my hands though?
Just hold them right up there, brother.
Okay.
Hold them right there. Okay, guys. So Jay, I would love to know if any of you guys find any good podcasts. I'm always open to hear them. Brainwaves is the only one I care about. Well, I also have a podcast called Neil and Tyler Explain Everything. If you want to check it out. No? Okay. Yeah. Get out of here. Don't. Ben's way better. Yeah. Ben's way better. Okay. So your evaluation, guys, I am going to go to tarveracademy.com/baller and I'm going to open up the evaluation. There's the last thing. It says 2:30 evaluation, goodbyes and hugs or something like that. I'm going to turn that into a link. So go there, refresh. It should be live in about a minute. You're going to select the top thing, which is the Baller Teacher Conference. And then I think the only thing that's option is a 6 hours. It will email you a certificate. If you don't get it, reach out to me. and I will see what went wrong. It should email it sometime today. Okay, I'm going to go in and change that link. Ben, I appreciate you. All of you guys that stuck with us today through all the bouncing to the website and the new videos, thank you. This was fun, and I would love to hear your thoughts and the evaluation on ways we can make it even better. Take us there, Ben. Take us away, man.
Let's let it breathe.
We did it, guys.
So good. So good.
All right,
Drink it up. It always goes down smooth.
So good. So good. Colorado, San Diego. I'll see you guys later. Y'all be good. Thank you, guys. I appreciate y'all a lot. I had fun. This was awesome.